Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. Can I first of all say a welcome to Victoria, who is here with us on the meeting this evening. As you all know, Victoria is here as part of our committee services team, and I believe will be taking over from Kelly when she goes away to have her baby. So Victoria, welcome very, very much to Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and to our committee services team. Before we start, could I check please that everyone has their phones either switched on to silent or turned off? Thank you. Just moving to the meeting itself, could you please note that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. I will commence the meeting and have when it is confirmed the meeting's live. Public participation, we will have, there is only one person who is taking part in the public participation and will be speaking on several items. And I will I'll take that public speaker at the beginning of each item to be discussed. Could you all please set your microphones to mute and only unmute your microphone to speak when I invite you to do so. Also, can you, if you wish to speak, raise your hand on the toolbar, and they will be taken in the order that they appear on the screen. And please, will you remember to take your hand down after you have finished speaking. If there are any votes this evening on recommendations, at my request, the regional officer will read out the names of the committee members in alphabetical order. Please unmute your microphone when you hear your name called and respond for, against, or abstain. After the vote is taken, the legal officer will then announce the result of the vote. In relation to the agenda, I have had a request from Grant Patterson and from Craig Pugh that we take agenda item 12 after agenda item 6 and agenda item 13 immediately after 12, and then we will move back to the agenda as printed. So if we could move on, do we have any apologies, please, Kelly?
I have not received any apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And item 3, we have the minutes of the previous meeting, of which you have a copy.
Sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Pomfret's put his hand up.
Councillor Tandy, is it correct that everybody's cameras are supposed to be off unless they're speaking?
Oh, sorry, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Brown, can you put your camera off, please? Councillor, thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Pomfret, I didn't spot you. Right, if we could move to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting that you have in front of you. Could I ask if they are accepted as a true and correct record? I see no dissent. Sorry, you just have to give me a minute because I may have to go out and come in again. Right. Okay, I think we may be working. I just said, do we have the minutes in front of us? Is it agreed that they are a true and correct record? If anybody wishes to speak, disagrees with that, could you please indicate by putting your hand up, and I will call your name. If I see no dissent, then I will assume that everyone is happy with the minutes. Currently, I see no dissent, so we are agreeing that the minutes are a true and correct record of the meeting. Okay. Agenda item 4 is the declaration of interest. Does anyone have any declaration of interest that are not already on the paperwork that you have in front of us? No. Okay. Moving then to, excuse me, agenda item 5, which is a public consultation. I have notification that Councillor Condacor wishes to speak on item 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, and I will call him before each of the items are discussed on the agenda. Item 6, our first report, is the internal audit half-yearly report, which is being presented by Linda. And I understand that Linda has some additional information that she wishes to share with you relating to the report. Linda, do you want to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is my half-yearly report showing progress against the approved internal audit plan. The internal audit plan for 2020-21 is at Appendix A to the report, and you can see there the work that's either been completed or is in progress. Progress has been quite slow, mainly because of COVID. People are home working, have other COVID-related activities that are high priority, so gathering evidence has been slower. But then at Appendix B, you will see that's the work that we've completed during this financial year so far and what the findings are. Councillor Tandy did express concerns around the equality findings because the team gave an overall audit opinion of limited. So this audit was finalised in mid-September. So a formal follow-up audit hasn't been completed yet, but I have done some work today just to update you on what work has been done and what we're doing to improve controls in that area. So the policy, the equality policy, that's been reviewed and is now ready for individual cabinet member approval. Training records, all equality training is now using an e-learning package on our training system Delta. Delta is maintained by our HR section, and they make sure that all the starters and leavers are updated on the system. So going forward, all statistics relating to training should be much more reliable because it's all being managed through the Delta system. We now maintain a central record of all discrimination incidents and translation requests, so the information on that is much more reliable. And what we're working on at the moment is we're looking at the equality impact forms and the information that we're gathering on there. And once we've reviewed and finalised those, they'll be made available for all employees via Content Manager. So that will reduce any inconsistencies in the information that we're gathering. We're starting to gather information for the equality report to committee members. And so that's likely to be ready, a report ready for the new year, going to scrutiny panel. And we're also working with IT to look at the web links and how they can improve on the ones that aren't working effectively at the moment. So that's just an update on what we're doing on equality. The this audit plan was initially put together in March, but not formally approved by this committee until July because meetings were suspended. And obviously with COVID and lockdown, things have changed quite a lot. So I have done some consultation with all senior managers to establish the impact on their services of COVID. And as a result of that consultation, I am proposing some changes to the internal audit plan going forward, and they're at Appendix C to the report. It shows the audits that I'm recommending be removed and the reasons why, and the audits to add to the plan, which are mainly the new systems and new issues that we've had to deal with as a result of COVID. In the body of the report at section 5 is just a summary of the counter-fraud activity and the work of our counter-fraud officer, and it shows the cashable and notional savings to the public purse that he's achieved so far in the current financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Does anyone wish to speak on this agenda report?
Chair, I was the public speaking slot.
Yes, you are. Sorry, Keith. Yes, you are. Go on.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm always interested in the independent audit, the internal audit, I should say, and these reports are always very good and very illuminating. A couple of points I'd just like to draw out. A lot of people don't understand the term development control. Some of it's building control and some of it's planning permissions and things. So it might be useful if Linda could actually just explain whether it's the building control or building control and planning that is being covered by this audit. And also on the issue of the wrong acreage or hectareage being put in by applicants, it's an easy thing to check, and I think it's quite illuminating how many errors have been found. And I hope we are checking our bigger planning applications to make sure we are collecting all the money due. On equality, I'm fascinated by the report that's being prepared to show how we're doing on equality. And I know that some areas of the council are more diverse than others. And I'm particularly concerned about recruitment, particularly to management posts being diverse, because we're not a particularly diverse management at the council. And also to the recruitment of new councillors. So I think these are two things that we need to do better on. And the big worry I got on the other stuff is the independent living service. I know we've had a big issue with the fire inspections, and I don't know if that's been part of Linda's work. But there was an issue last month about a fire alarm going off at one of our independent living locations. And people, because it was in the daytime when we haven't got the fire marshals there, people not really knowing what to do. And I don't know if the changes in that have been properly audited, and we're happy with those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Linda, do you have a reply, please? Linda.
Sorry, Chair, I was struggling to unmute myself. Yeah, the development control, we specifically looked at the planning side of it and not building control in response to the first one. And with the fire risk assessments, you'll note at Appendix C that the Health and Safety Manager has specifically asked us to add fire risk assessments within our corporate buildings to the audit plan.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Chair, can I just clarify, does corporate buildings include independent living or not?
No, it doesn't. The independent living schemes, I understand, are being dealt with externally, and so they're being managed via a contract.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to say thank you to you, Linda, for the work that you've done on equality. And with inequality increasing so significantly across the country lately, it was a little bit alarming to see that NBBC's controls were limited. So I'm really glad to see how much work has taken place to improve equality controls. And so I just wanted to thank you for that, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In Appendix B, under right to buy, we have an acronym GGP. I would like to know what that means, please. And also, as right to buy is, as I understand it, a statutory process that's the same right across the country. I'm a bit concerned that we have a process document that can't be opened and nobody's been trained on how to get into it. So to all intents and purposes, we cannot be sure that we're following the statutory process with this. And also, given that it's a statutory process that's equal across the country, can we not literally piggyback onto another council's process document, perhaps borrow it and fine-tune it to our own needs to get us through this temporary blip? If you could just give me some commentary on that, please, Linda, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, controls in this area are quite good because they've actually given us significant assurance. The GGP, I'm not quite sure what those initials stand for, but that's the system that records all the council-owned property and land. So as properties are sold, it needs to be updated and kept up to date so that we have a complete record of what property is owned by the council.
Okay, thank you. I just want to come back.
Yeah.
So we don't know if we're following the process. We haven't got a process document that we can interrogate, but we've still managed to give significant assurance on this. So how are we managing that then if we don't actually know if we're following the process?
I think the issue here was that the officers dealing with right to buy at the moment to deal with it very effectively, which is why we've given significant assurance. But because there are no procedural notes, it would be difficult if those personnel were to leave, because whoever takes over the process hasn't got a process to follow.
Right. So we're saying the people who are in post are experts at the job. They know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, but it's all in their head. But
yeah, and we would struggle if we had to sort of manage the knowledge that they've got for succession planning.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Linda. If I can just have a quick look through this to page 13. Obviously, it's great that you've made reference to the counter fraud activities again and the shared officer that we have with another council. That continues each year to seem to be more than paying for itself and well worthwhile. There's 4 bullet points of things that they're particularly looking into. Right to buy, funnily enough, is on there, albeit from a different perspective, from a fraud perspective. And given that that's such a lengthy and bureaucratic process and the very considerable controls lenders would have in place, I hope that we're only confining ourselves there to looking at maybe those that have a meaningful chance of risk, like cash purchases or whatever, because I think, with the controls that lenders have in place, it would be, if people can defeat those, then we're almost certainly not going to spot it as a part-time counter fraud officer. Turning to page 15, I'm a bit surprised about the debtors review. It seemed to be limited between the sundry debt invoices that we raised between 2004 and 2014. Is that a typo? Should that be 2020 on page 15 under debtors?
Oh, yeah. No, these are aged debtors that are still on the system. So they are invoices that go back that far that have been written off. They're still sitting there on the system.
Right. So what about the sundry debt that we have that's more recent? Because this is 6 years old. So this has been written off. What? Because it's outside limitation, or?
It hasn't. It's still sitting there. So they need to clear the system.
So some have got judgments and I presume charging orders or whatever with it.
Yeah.
It's just normally I would the more valuable element and the more important bit wouldn't be the stuff that was more than 6 years old, or in this case, some of it 16 years old. Was any of the more recent debt in the last 6 years looked at?
Yes, they would have looked at the up-to-date, and they haven't raised any issues around the collection process that is now. It's just that there is still some information on there that is 16 years old, so a decision needs to be taken as to whether that needs to be written off or what they're going to do about it.
Okay, Chair, if I may, I'd like to propose that the Appendix B get amended for the minutes, just to make reference to the fact that that all the debtors were looked at, the more recent ones, and it wasn't just the debtors between 2004 and 14, because otherwise people might wonder why we didn't look at the last few years. And it turns out that Linda says we did. We just need to have a record of that in the minutes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then the only other thing I wanted to raise was on page 18, Appendix C, housing lettings, and council tax and non-domestic rates. They're two of the audits you're proposing to remove. Reassuringly, they're not because of lack of time or whatever, because I would have said, you know, maybe with the two big areas like these where there's a huge amount of money involved, the council should look for external resource if it was a question that Linda and her team couldn't get round to it, but it's not. It's down to the fact that the people working in those teams, it appears, are just so stretched due to COVID and dealing with that, they wouldn't reasonably be able to give their best to any audit. Is that a fair summary, Linda?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
that's the reason why. And if I can just go back to your point on right to buy,
Yeah.
The counter fraud officer looks at it at the application stage, and only where applications look unusual, and it has resulted in applications being withdrawn.
Oh, that's good. So I'm glad it's targeted, which is, as I say, I wouldn't want us to be trying to second guess what high street lenders are doing. So that's very reassuring to hear that. Thank you, Linda, that there is targeted measures there, because they're a limited resource and would want to keep them focused. But yeah, in terms of the two main audits that you're looking to drop on page 18, can we have assurances that they will be included as priorities for the 2021-22?
Yes, we will. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will make sure, ensure that those comments you wish in the minutes will be placed there, Councillor Tromans. I have two recommendations which are on page 12 of Agenda 6, and that is 2.1 and 2.2. Can I move both of those recommendations, please? And is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Sorry, Chair, I raised it by accident. I don't want to speak.
Okay. Okay, if we can then move, as I stated earlier at the very start of the meeting, we are moving now to agenda item 12, which is the external auditor's report. Welcome again to the meeting, Grant. If you want to speak to your report. Now, I know we don't have any papers for this. I did ask if we could have any information put on the screen. I'm not sure exactly what position we're in with that at the moment. But Grant, if you'd like to present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of our report, I think it was put on as a supplementary pack. I can see Craig's got his hand up. I could try and share my screen, but I will speak to it as it stands. So what you have in front of you today is our draft audit findings report. As a result of the pandemic, our work commenced during July and is currently still ongoing at the time of writing the report. The work has been completed remotely, and we would like to extend our thanks to Craig and the wider finance team for the help and support. I think just for members, there have been two areas where we've had to change our audit plan. I think we mentioned, we brought to you at the previous meeting. In the plan, we were uncertain at the time whether we would need to undertake a group audit as a result of consolidation of NABCEL, The council has gone through that and decided that and determined that there will be no material impact of consolidating NAB sale, and therefore group accounts weren't required. We've reviewed that and we're satisfied with that, so that we're doing a single entity audit. And secondly, there was to reflect our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we added a new significant risk, which we call financial statements level risk, as well as a pandemic. And whilst there's an element of that does look at what year-end valuation uncertainties, we were already covering elements of that off in our plan for our work on the balance sheet. Therefore, the focus of that was primarily on understanding how the councils responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and its ability to produce the financial statements and update financial forecasts. So that was the changes to our audit plan that you've already seen. I think in relation to that, we can say we have worked constructively with the finance team to ensure that we've jointly managed this unprecedented situation. But as we've highlighted, it's on page 3 of our report, and if you have managed to get the electronic version, I think it's page 7 of the electronic version, there have been issues that have impacted adversely upon the efficiency of the accounts audit, and primarily those in timeliness and completeness of working papers at the beginning of the audit. As I say, we did agree those requirements at the audit. Not all were available when the audit started. And then some of those working papers, because it wasn't a timely manner, some of our procedures have been delayed. And that's primarily in the area of property, plant and equipment. I think probably what I want to bring to your attention, I think it has highlighted, is that many of those queries are dealt and coordinated by one member of the finance teams. In prior years, we have commented upon that key person risk that you run with being a small authority. But I think we are recognising it also creates a significant amount of work for that individual in servicing the queries that come out of our audit. We have therefore recommended that for future years, the council do consider reviewing that arrangement, and including looking to delegate more to members of the team to try and spread, I suppose, the workload around and the knowledge and information. That has been agreed by the council, and you do have an apprentice who's working through the council, and hopefully that will become forward in future years and as a response to in our report. I think in terms of the actual audit findings, where we are at the moment, we've set out the status of the audit on page 6, I think at page 10 of the pack, where we've not identified any matters to date that will affect our opinion, but clearly that's subject to us clearing our outstanding work. We've identified 2 adjustments to the accounts. There is a £600,000 transposition error in respect of evaluation that doesn't only impact the balance sheet, and that was amended in, I think, the accounts you have in front of you tonight. And there was a disclosure error in note 14 in respect of a failure to reverse an impairment, and that's because an asset got valued. But again, it's only in the disclosure note. And management has confirmed that those accounts will be amended to take account of those. I think one of the new things you'll be seeing, and some of you have been on maybe if you on the county council's committees as well, is that we are seeing, because of the pandemic, disruption in property markets and significant reduction in property transactions, particularly over the year end, and therefore observable inputs alongside sort of increased uncertainties in cost indices. And as a result of that turmoil, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors did issue guidance to its members that valuation, what they call valuation material uncertainty disclosures, were likely to be required. So that doesn't invalidate the valuations they do. This is just valuers saying that they're highlighting that there's less certainty can be placed upon them than normal. So in discussion with the council, what we are asking the council to do, and your valuer in that respect has made such disclosures, is those disclosures get reflected in your financial statements. And then as your auditor, what we then propose to do is to highlight those in our auditor's report, because we think that's fundamental to someone understanding a reader of your accounts for this year. A slightly tangential one to that is when auditing the pension fund, or the Warwickshire Pension Fund. The Warwickshire Pension Fund, they hold pooled investment properties. There's been disclosures around the valuers valuing those, that they've made material uncertainty disclosures, and therefore, as you and your net pension liability, you have part of a proportion of those assets allocated to yourselves. It is material when it flows through to the council. So we've asked that disclosure gets made within the council's financial statements as well. And again, we'll refer to that in what we call an emphasis matter. So that's not to say that, and I must stress that it's not saying that our audit opinion is modified or qualified in any way. We are saying that this is appropriately disclosed in the council's accounts, and we're highlighting that matter to a reader of those accounts, so that to help their understanding. So those were the sort of two things we found at the moment. We have completed our value for money arrangements and concluded that the council has proper arrangements in place to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness of its resources. But I'll just come on a bit more detail in a moment to there are some messages I think that we would like to communicate to the council. Going back to significant risks, just to inform the council, members of the committee, no change to our materiality. I've already covered the response to COVID, and in relation to risk, we did rebut what we call the recognition of revenue risk, and our work has not identified anything that would need to change that conclusion. On management override of controls, that's an auditing risk that we cannot rebut, and what we do address that is through our work on journals. We have highlighted that as part of our review of journals control environment, we did identify 2 users at the council who have super user access, and those privileges allow those individuals to log on as other users. So from a practical point of view, that is necessary. It does allow them to assist with any issues that come up, but the risk is that the activity performed by those while acting as another user isn't logged. So there is a potential risk for that. I can say that we have considered this as part of our risk assessment, and we've gone through the journals, and from our sample of testing journals, we haven't found any that are not appropriate, eligible and valid, and so we're happy we can agree with that. But we have recommended that you look at that going forward about how you might look to address that weakness, that deficiency in control. And finally, I suppose in a way, on our PP&E work that is still in progress. Some of the key areas we're just looking at the moment are to finalise is you do have your council dwellings valued, but there was around about £15 million that wasn't valued this year. So we're just going through the final process of checking that couldn't lead to a material misstatement, and that's subject to final review. We have identified one case where you use beacons, where you class properties, you put them into a beacon and effectively you value beacons, where we found one property was in the wrong beacon. So we've had to extend our sample to assess that impact. I'm not anticipating that being material, but that work isn't complete yet. And probably one improvement area that we did notice was in the valuers report that you received, it's very light on detail. And there's certainly greater challenge coming into us to look at the assumptions behind all the valuations. And we were recommending that in future years that the council's valuer puts more detail into that report, and that has been accepted as a recommendation. Again, that's within our audit findings report. The other bits just to bring to your, I was going to bring to your attention, were going concern and value for money. We've sort of linked, we've reported them separately, but they are interlinked clearly. We've looked at the budgetary process for the council, and we're satisfied from our review that the council has sufficient reserves. And from our perspective, that's looking at both general fund and earmark revenue reserves to support its finances should savings plans not be delivered. But as has been reported by your Section 151 officer, your overall level of reserves are lower when compared to similar authorities when you look at indexes like CIPSA's Financial Resilience Index. And therefore, we do advise the council and members to remain vigilant, and there are certainly remain significant uncertainties, certainly in the current environment, that you will need to manage. And you're rightly concerned that there's a number of unknowns, particularly with around your funding. The government, I think, has now announced, I think, where we're looking at a one-year CSR, or comprehensive spending review, hopefully then with greater certainty coming in after that. But there might be knock-on effects if there's downturn in the economy as well. So one thing coming out of that is we did suggest the council sort of update its disclosures a little bit around COVID, and it's done that. And finally, I suppose bringing into the VFM, we did say on the medium-term financial strategy, you have looked at that back, we're reviewing that this autumn, but there are those uncertainties to grapple with. The ongoing impact of COVID on some costs is still unknown, and certainly as we're going into the second lockdown. And also there's elements around, and there's a degree of uncertainty about what you'll actually get back from the government's income incentive scheme. And as I said earlier, the results of the comprehensive spending review. We're therefore issuing an unqualified value for money conclusion, but we just observe those following the comments around that your general fund level reserves, make sure that they are able to withstand COVID in the short term. It's essential that you do continue to consider long-term sustainability. And as you do revisit and refresh your MTF, your medium-term financial plan, it's imperative that any savings plans are both robust and not just savings targets to aim for. And finally, as we would say, as the full impact of the pandemic does become known, it's likely you will need to consider reducing spending non-essential services to avoid the need to draw down on reserves. But again, I think that's clearly a decision for members. We would just say we think that's where the wind will be blowing, but we don't know the final support that government will be able to provide. So that's where I wanted to sort of bring a fairly long, I suppose, a sort of short presentation together. I'm happy to take questions on that, and I know that you have a public speaker as well.
Yes, thank you. Having been at the West Midlands Combined Authority audit meeting last week, I am aware that several councils were talking about the problems that they were having with audits, as you yourself were, Grant, because of the difficulties of COVID. But I do have speakers. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. A few particular points to start with. I think the finance team capacity is a really big issue. As we're taking on more stuff and potentially doing regeneration projects, we really do not have a big enough financial team. And I think that needs to be realised. And I think we need to, when doing more stuff, we need to think, do we really need to do this? Otherwise, our financial team just cracks under the strain of work, and we don't get things properly scrutinised. I really am shocked by the Gresham Road story, and it carries on. So in the paperwork, it says there was a £600,000 misvaluation of it in the accounts. But it's interesting, it's valued at 1.7 million. And I don't know if that's land or land and buildings, because we paid about 3 million for it as a project. But I think it would be useful for members to understand that the various stories about us overspending by 2 million were actually wrong. We actually underestimated how much the project would cost. But I think maybe a breakdown of the value of Gresham Road would be useful for members. And I think our more general thing, I'm very worried that members haven't read this auditor's report before they're going to approve it tonight. I'm not on this committee, and I've looked through, skimmed all the parts of it to see what needs worrying about. And I don't see how this committee can approve the report tonight if you haven't read it. So I don't know why members haven't had a paper copy or read the electronic copy, but I think it's really bad practice for the audit committee not to read the audit report from the external auditors. I find that unbelievable, and I asked you actually defer this item before you actually vote on it, so you can actually read what you're voting on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to pick up on the 600,000 that was touched on by Grant. As he phrased it, it doesn't seem that it's an incorrect valuation. It seems that somebody just typed the figure in wrong, which is, kind of obviously, I'd like to know how wrong that figure was. If it was 500 that should have been 6, or if it was 100 that should have been 6, clearly has the level of materiality there, and the effect on the very substantial. The other thing that always worries me was something else that Grant touched on about the review of the journals. That all seemed fine, and I'm sure it is. They seem a very diligent bunch in the finance team there. But the fact that 2 people have super user logons, I can understand that there might be a requirement for that to override things on systems, backs transactions out or whatever, and to do various administrative tasks like resetting people's passwords. But what I want some assurance about is there a log kept of, does the system track when those super users log on as other users, when they use their super user password to get in as another user? If it doesn't, what are the controls that we've got in place? Do they have perhaps a more limited user log on that they can use most of the time and just log on as a super user by exception when that's needed? So I think I'd like a bit of reassurance around that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take the questions, Grant, or do you want me just to get any questions together?
I could respond quickly to a couple of them. In relation to the transposition error, Yes, it was basically a classic. It was. I think it was typing into the fixed asset register. I think the value should have been 1718, and it was put in as 1178. So that ends up being a 600,000 transposition error. So that's been amended. I'd have to. I think the depot. I think I can see that Craig's got his hand up. I think it's land and buildings, but I would just need to go back into a file to check that one. So I'll quickly do that, and maybe then I'll see to address the rest when the other queries come in.
Thank you. Thank you. Craig, I notice you have your hand up. Did you want to speak now?
Yeah, I can clarify. As Grant's just said, the error on the valuation for Gresham Road, it should have been the building as 1778 and it was input as 1178. There is an additional £370,000 value of the land, so the total value should have been 2148 for the Gresham Road depot. Regarding the super user access, this is something we're going to have discussions with our software providers, because at the moment it doesn't keep a log that we can see of when they access as another user, which would be infrequent, and if they needed to do some assistance to make sure that that individual's role was set up correctly. But we will have discussions with Unit 4, who operate our software, and see if there's a way that we can actually manage that to reduce the risk in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig.
Sorry, Chair, just to come back on that, just for clarity, so that the committee know, how long has this been an issue then? Is it a new piece of software that we've just brought in, or has it been going on potentially for years that we haven't had this control?
It's not a new piece of software, and it's been identified as part of the testing that Grant Thornton have done. So it's something that, yeah, we do need to address and see if we can, get it rectified for the future. The two members of staff that do have that access are senior within my finance team. So it's not a junior position, but it's something, yes, we will need to have a look at and see how we can sort it for the future.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. I would just like to reassure Councillor Condacor that we have had the papers. We did get this one a little bit late on Friday, but I've got it here in front of me. 184 pages altogether. So I would like to just ask whoever is the relevant person why we did get that quite late. But my question is to Mr. Patterson. I think you said, Mr. Patterson, that you've given us an unqualified value for money report, but I heard you say that your recommendations are that we need to reduce spending on non-essential services to avoid drawing down on reserves. Now, the general public are always calling upon the council to draw down on those reserves. So I would like you to, if you can, to please explain why you have recommended not drawing down on the reserves.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So I'm not recommending it. I can't recommend that. I think I'm just saying you'll need to keep that under review in the sense of in these uncertain times, as I say, your levels of reserves, they're adequate, but you are towards the lower end. And I think reserves can only be used once. So I think what we're trying to say, it need to be balanced. So you'll need to be looking at, depending on, I can't predict the future, but if we stay flat in the economy for now, the pressures on local government are likely to grow. It's likely potentially you'll need to draw on those reserves. So I'm not recommending that your politicians, that's your role quite properly to make those decisions on behalf of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. So I think we're just saying that, I suppose in that sense, you can only draw upon those reserves once. If you draw upon them and you haven't got, I suppose, savings plans behind them to keep them at those levels, then you do face the potential of running out of money, but not, we're not saying that's going to happen in the immediate future, but that's what we're saying. So I'm not making a recommendation that you have to do this right now, but you do need to keep a close eye on where your expenditure is and the elements that are there. And I suppose as a council, effectively, you'll have non-discretionary expenditure, i.e. you've got to do stuff under statute, and there'll be elements of discretion that you could look at as a council, and you'll be the same as any other councils. And not alone in this. I mean, there's been a recent public interest report in relation to Croydon London Borough around if you don't take action at the appropriate time. So I'm not suggesting you must do that, but I'm saying that if you want to use those reserves and they're not backed by savings plans, you can only use them once, basically. So it needs to be part of a whole overall package of where you're spending that. So I'm not saying you should be doing that immediately, but you need to keep an eye on that as a council.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back quickly?
Yep.
Sorry. So the public perception is that our reserves are really high, but you've said our levels of reserves are adequate, but are towards the lower end, and basically once they're gone, they're gone.
Well,
So
yes, I mean, I think,
high.
yes, sorry, CIPFA has done a financial resilience index, and it's basically ranked councils about where they are based upon their size and nature, and you're towards the lower end, the lower quartile. And yes, reserves are a one-off. They are, well, that's money that through prudent management and that you have put to one side. In terms of your reserves, you'll have them in split into two. You'll have earmarked where you as a council have planned to spend them, on projects that you believe that you'll need to do. And then there's be more of those general fund reserves, as we would call them, that are sort of maybe unallocated. I think as a council, your Section 151 officer, you said you've got to maintain around about £1 million in an unallocated in general fund reserve, and that's to manage any year-on-year expenditure variations. And I think I remember reading reports about 6 to 7% of your spend. And we were saying that that's a prudent way. You don't want to go down to zero, because if you're an overspend in the year. But around that, yes, you have discretion about where you want to use them. But once they have been utilised, then yes, you either have to save money to replenish them, to reuse them, and that will depend upon where government funding comes. And I suppose in the current circumstances, you would normally look to income generation and elements like that, but that's clearly risky in the you can't guarantee that in the current environment. People are going out less, people aren't spending as much on elements of fees and charges that you provide. So there's always risk coming in, and I think that's where you're facing at the moment. And you're not alone in this. I should say it's not a Nuneaton and Bedworth. All local councils are facing this challenge of a lot of their income streams have been significantly hit as a result of the pandemic, and no one is clear or certain about how quickly they will return and whether they will return to the levels previously seen.
Okay. Thank you. I don't.
Sorry, Councillor, did you want also in terms of the delay to report, that is down to the fact of we are still audits are taking longer. So the reason you got it late was that we were still working our way through the audit, and that's why it's a draft annual findings report. And we're just finding that generally audits are taking longer this year. We did have conversations about whether we might have a conversation to put the audit committee back. We have done that elsewhere at other councils, but we felt that it's better. We are nearly complete. We felt it's better to come to you now. And what I would propose to do is, once we have completed our work, we will sort of reissue the the audit findings report in a final version that can be shared with members as well.
Okay, thank you. And apologies, I did get it just about in time to read it, but it was touch and go. Thank you.
Right, thank you for those presentations and for answering the questions, Grant. I wasn't planning to propose that we accept it, that we approve the report. I'm actually going to move that the report is noted. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you very much. Gori, you want it? Gori, do you want to speak? Gori?
Yep. I wanted to second it, but it's been seconded. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thank you again for coming along. Well, not actually coming along these days, is it? For being here with us at the meeting. And we look forward to seeing you at further meetings. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman. I will propose to stay on the call, actually, because I think if you've got the accounts coming up, there may well be further questions coming out of that. So.
Okay, that's fine. Right, so if we could then move on to Agenda 13, which is the Statement of Accounts 2019-20. Craig.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Grant, for the audit findings report. Yeah, just to reiterate about Councillor Elliott, the delay in getting this information to you was so we could get as much of the audit completed prior to presenting to this committee. As we say, it is still ongoing, but the majority of the work has now been done. So apologies for the delay in getting this info to you. Right, this report is being presented later than previous years. We had amended regulations, which meant there was a longer time allowable for completion of the accounts and the corresponding audit. These revised regulations for this year only mean that we have to get these published by the end of November. So that's why we're bringing this to this committee. As Grant has said, it's been a very challenging year this year in preparing the accounts due to COVID-19 and the remote working and the consequences of that. But I'm pleased to say that the draft accounts were completed in time with the extended timescales, and they were presented to Grant Thornton before the end of July as required and published on the web and emailed to all councillors. There's no changes to the format of the accounts this year, but there have been additional disclosures, as Grant said earlier, due to COVID-19 and the estimation uncertainty really on the valuation of council assets. And that's been disclosed in quite a number of the individual notes within the financial statements. Grant also said about group accounts, and we took an internal view that group accounts weren't required, which Grant Thornton did agree to. But for transparency, we did include a detailed note of NABCEL within the statements. Appendix A to the report gives explanations for significant movements on the comprehensive income and expenditure account and the balance sheet year on year. So hopefully that will give some additional information to you. And section 6 of the report gives the adjustments made to the accounts that you've got as Appendix B. Section 7 just reconfirms what Grant had said about the audit still progressing, and progress has been made on many of these items now, and I can say I've seen a lot of emails flying around between our internal valuer and the auditors on the additional information they needed. But because of this, the committee are asked to give delegated authority to the chair and the council section 151 officer, for any minor adjustments required, and that will hopefully allow for the accounts to be published prior to the 30th of November. So there are 4 recommendations to this report, which are at section 2. 2.1, that the statement of accounts for 1920 presented at Appendix B, including accounting policies and the AGS, be approved. And that 2.2, delegated authority be given to the Executive Director for Resources and the Chair of the Committee to approve any minor subsequent adjustments as required by Grant Thornton following completion of their audit work. 2.3, that any further adjustments as required at 2.2 are communicated to the members of the committee as soon as possible. And then 2.4, finally, that when requested, Grant Thornton be provided with a letter of representation signed by the Chair of the Committee and the Executive Director of Resources. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I would raise on the recommendation, I would like the comments on all of them to also include the Vice Chair in any discussions that I held with finance officers. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is most disappointing that the stuff you're sending out is only going to members of this committee. The Green Party sadly isn't represented on the Audit and Standards Committee, and I would ask you could amend it so actually you send to all members of the council any updates on this so that we actually are fully informed. The council is a corporate body, and all members of the council should take an interest in the accounts, even those who don't sit on the committee. I'd also like to talk about the car parking impairment, because that is quite a shocking change in valuation from 16 million to 14 million. Totally understand why the value of our car parks is pants at the moment, and we'd like to continue to be pants as various things have changed over time. People shop less in town even before COVID, so we should have probably revalued them earlier by some of this amount. And I didn't know whether that we've actually been overpaying business rates on them. If they're actually worth 4 million rather than 16 million, that's quite a lot of impact on the business rates they may be due on them. So I don't know if someone can comment on that. And finally, we made other investments such as in Molly's Cafe and things like that, which now aren't trading. And I do think we need to be careful about investing in investment properties to generate a return, and B, I think it'd be useful to have a breakdown of what investments we have in retail and what impairments they have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. Craig, do you want to respond to Councillor Condacor?
No, there's nothing specific. I've made notes, so it's something we can pick up in future if need be. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just put on record thanks to Craig and the team, because we're going through the audit at the minute, and I'm very sympathetic to him, and we've got a lot more resource than he has. So thank you for all your work. I know I asked you this earlier, Craig, but could you just reassure the committee on the delegated authority what your threshold is for minor, major adjustments, just so it's clear that we're not. I mean, I'm happy to be included in it, as the chair says, but just so we're not taking on any powers that we shouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. My view is that if it's presentation and doesn't affect our resources, so it doesn't affect balances, then I think I would class that as minor, but I'd be mindful to take any view from Grant Patterson or Simone on this one. But my view would be, if it's purely presentational and doesn't affect our general fund or HRA resources, then I would consider that personally to be a minor adjustment.
Thank you. But if there was seen to be found any major adjustments, then we may have to look at calling a special meeting of this committee to discuss them. But if they are just minor, that is the proposal that Craig is making. Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could I ask Craig, have there been any objections this year to the statement of accounts at all?
I've not been made aware of any objections this year, Councillor Evans.
Okay, as the period now closed for the public to make objections, or is that done after we approve them?
Objections would have to be presented to Grant Patterson at Grant Thornton, so whether he can clarify that one.
Grant, can you help with that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. There's a 30-day window in which you can raise objections from the publication of the draft accounts, and I believe that has now closed. So we haven't received any objections on this year's accounts per se. And the other comment I would have in relation to Councillor Condacor's comment is that the car park impairment is still part of our ongoing discussions with the council. I mean, primarily what I can say is generally car parks are valued, and I know you've done an impairment based upon 3 years prior year income. So, but you've decided to do that impairment. So we're having those ongoing conversations around the level of that impairment and the appropriate, how big it might have to be, or whether it's more of a post-balance sheet event. But that is part of our ongoing audit conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, sorry.
Councillor Evans, anything more?
Yeah, sorry, I do have one more point I wish to make, Chair. I would be interested in hearing, I don't know if Simone Hines is on the call or not, or possibly even Philip Richardson, about the recommendation that if there's any minor modifications, they be approved by the chair. My understanding is, and I'm currently reading the council's constitution, Article A9.3, financial reporting, paragraph A, states that it's the responsibility of the committee to approve the annual statement of accounts. And surely if there were to be any amendments, however minor they be, surely that would need to come through the committee. I'd just be interested in hearing what the Section 151 officer has got to say on that, if possible.
Do you have a comment, Simone?
Yeah, I think although, as Councillor Evans says, the Constitution does provide for the Audit and Standards Committee to approve the accounts, it is also able then that committee is able to delegate that to the chair in these circumstances. And I do believe that this is a delegation that's also been recommended for other authorities to adopt as well. I think Grant had mentioned that it's the suggestion that they've made to other authorities because of the very tight timescale that we're working to on accounts this year, that it was, you know, a solution to ensure that the accounts deadline of the end of November was achieved. But as we've said, if there are any material adjustments, then we would have to arrange an urgent Audit and Standards Committee to bring those adjustments back. We're just suggesting if they're minor adjustments at this point, that it would be reasonable to include that delegation to the chair and the vice chair, as we've amended tonight, to do those. But I think Grant, as our external auditor, was comfortable with that recommendation and that delegation.
Grant, do you want to speak?
Yeah, Chair. I mean, I'm comfortable with the recommendation. I mean, I would have to, you know, depending on what if your monitoring officer is happy that the sub delegation is fine. I can't necessarily speak to that. But in terms of practical, it is a way that we are working or looking to work with council. So if there's minor adjustments then or amendments, you know, typos, anything like that, then it seems to be a practical way forward. And certainly I, as your auditor, if there was a significant change to the accounts, I'd be coming back to both Simone and Craig and say we should be reporting that back to Audit Committee. So, you know, because this is a public document, and I pick up, you know, the point around it, if those changes go through. I'm not anticipating any, but that's where we would need to be. If that's, and as I say, I will commit to also producing an updated audit findings report that will be final and show all the work's been completed, and that will pick up any final adjustments as well.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, please.
Okay, fine.
Thanks, Chair. So I may have misheard Councillor Condacor, but just to avoid the public being misinformed, I believe that Councillor Condacor was saying that the papers should be sent to all councillors and not just committee members. Now, I do have the email here in front of me, sent on the 30th of October, where the papers were sent to all NBBC councillors. So I apologise if I misheard Councillor Condacor, but we've all had the papers. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Condacor, you wish to respond to that?
I just want to clarify, it was if Grant Thornton or someone sent some adjustments out later that we wanted a copy of them, not the papers that have already been sent. So in the deliberations and discussions, Craig was saying there may need to be some more stuff about adjustments and other stuff, that it was going to be sent to members of the committee. I think they should be sent to other councillors. So it's not the stuff we've had, it's stuff that is sent to you in future. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Chair, could I ask on recommendation 2.3, where it says that any further adjustments per recommendation 2.2 are communicated to the members of this committee as soon as possible. Actually, I do think that Councillor Condacor makes a point. I think it does need to be all councillors on the council. But if it was to include all members on the council, then I would happily support all 4 recommendations.
Yeah, I had planned to move to the recommendations, but I am going to including the vice chair in any discussions, and also Councillor Evans' suggestion that any adjustments go to all councillors. But I would also add a 2.5, that if it was felt that any of the adjustments that were to be made were of a more major nature, that an emergency meeting of the committee be called. So based on those 5 recommendations that you heard, is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Pomfret.
Right. Grant, did you want to speak again? I can see your hand.
No, that's probably up from a while ago. Sorry, that's my fault. Apologies.
Councillor Brown.
Chair, would you mind please putting the additional recommendation into chat so we can just see what it says? I would like to know exactly what I'm voting on.
I've written, should it become clear that there be any form of major adjustment to the report, then an emergency meeting of this committee will be held.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bearing those recommendations in mind, that has been moved and seconded. Is there anyone who if everyone is voting in favour of those recommendations and there is no dissent, then they will be carried forward. At this point, I can see no dissent, so that those recommendations are carried. Thank you. And thank you to Grant and to Craig for bringing those reports to us in very, very difficult circumstances. So if we could move on to agenda item 7, which is the Ombudsman's report, I believe to be presented by Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a report for noting, and it's the annual report from the Ombudsman showing the activity over the previous 12 months. In 4 points, you'll see there's a series of Ombudsman decisions, and the ones to draw attention to are on page 22 of the agenda, which are the 4 cases where the cases were upheld, and you'll see in the right-hand column what the remedy or action taken was. That's the report, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to comment on the report? Therefore,
Chair, I put down to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you did, Councillor Condacor. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief. Although the Ombudsman have only found in a few cases, it's alarming how many things are being referred to the Ombudsman, which gives an indication we've actually got lots of problems with our own complaint system, that people are actually forwarding 36 items onto the Ombudsman. And a very large number of those were environmental services, public protection and regulation, which is a very wide area of the council's work. And I think it would be useful for the committee to know the sort of general areas in which we're getting these complaints in, because there's a very large number. I'd expect a small council to get a dozen complaints in a year, but it does seem a large number of things are going wrong in the area, and our complaint system is not actually dealing with that. And also, Chair, this is in the 61 page. Councillor earlier said we had an 184 page report. You've got a 61 page and 184 page, and this is in the 61 page. I don't know if everyone's yet read it, so it might be useful for you just to confirm you've actually got a copy of it yourself. So it's a 61 page report, agenda item 7, and I'm particularly worried about the things on page 20, which is all the environmental services complaints. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would draw your attention, Councillor, to the review letter that was sent along with the Ombudsman's report. But do you wish to comment on Councillor Condacor's points, Mr. Richardson?
No, Chair, other than to say the report is there, and it does just set out the position as it was over the previous 12 months. I don't think there's anything specific to draw from it in terms of the number of complaints. It seems fairly much as we have in previous years.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to confirm that I've read the report twice. So on page 22, it lists the 4 complaints that were upheld against the council in favour of the complainant, and I make reference to the complaint dated the 5th of the 8th 2019, where it states the council has apologised, agreed that Mr X received poor service, and explained that the issue had been addressed with the member of staff and that performance would be monitored. This was a fair and proportionate response. Are you able to give some sort of clarity to the committee on whether the monitored performance in that department was sufficient, and was that a good result, as in was that individual improving?
Mr. Richardson.
Chair, I'm not in a position to confirm that. It's obviously a matter that falls under Chris Tideman's directorate. So what I can do, Chair, is take that away and ask Chris to prepare a note to confirm that is indeed the case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. So you will receive a response, Councillor Evans, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, the other point that I would make is, I do understand that there's lots of complaints on here, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of people will turn to the Ombudsman if they feel that they haven't got the response they want from the council, and I am encouraged that the Ombudsman on page 25 does state that the council is in line with the national statistics. So other than the comment that I made regarding page 22, I'm fairly satisfied with the report.
Thank you. I don't have any other speakers. The recommendation is that the content of the report be noted. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Chair. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 8, which is the attendance at cabinet meetings. Philip, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, this is one of those reports that was in the large pack that Councillor Kandaka mentioned that was sent out electronically on Friday. Mercifully, it's a short report, and it emanates from some decisions that were discussed at the Constitution Review Working Party. It's a suggestion that has come forward to reflect some practice that is undertaking in other local authorities where there is a sort of wider participation at cabinet meetings. So the recommendation is as set out in section 2.1. And if that is approved and the leader of the council agrees, then of course council can then amend the constitution accordingly. Just to mention, Chair, there is an appendix just to set out the explanation about the dichotomy between executive functions and council functions. It isn't a simple way of presenting things with the changes that were wrought by the 2000 Act, but it was a definite and intentional act on the part of government to separate out, as they do in Parliament, between the Cabinet and the parliamentary decision makers. So we have that replicated here, and the message is never the twain shall meet. So in terms of the cabinet or the executive, it is for the leader of the executive to make the necessary decisions to bring this into effect. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if need be.
Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. This sort of thing happens at the county council, where any county councillor can go to the cabinet and talk at the leader of the council's discretion, and I think it's very beneficial. The leader of the council never scraps things because I tell her to scrap things, but sometimes little tweaks are made because we do have members of the opposition round the table at the cabinet, and I think it's a real positive step to getting less fractious politics. So I really support this on the proviso that I'm not disenfranchised, and it's not entirely clear from the wording of the proposal if I would be included to be allowed to speak at cabinet meetings in the same way as other members would, unless I formed a group with someone. We clearly have about 10% of the Nuneaton and Bedworth population vote Green. I do hope I am included in this very constructive step of letting members of the council get involved in the discussions, but not the votes at cabinet. One of the other really useful things is the ability because officers are quite often brought into cabinet discussions to actually almost like ask questions or make a statement. And I think actually listening to be part of the cabinet process and actually having an officer respond to an area of some uncertainty is very useful. So I say I'm very keen this goes forward, but I do want to make sure it goes forward in a way that I'm not disenfranchised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Councillor Elliott.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. So 2 points or questions on this, please. So the purpose of the report is to allow an opposition spokesperson to attend and speak at cabinet meetings. Does that not already happen? That's my first question. Councillor Condicle doesn't want to be disenfranchised. I know that Councillor Condicle attends and speaks at cabinet meetings. I'm a little bit confused. I'd just like that to be clarified, please. And the second point or question, however you want to take it, is that we're looking to emulate neighbouring councils, Coventry and Solihull. I just wondered why we're looking to Coventry and Solihull. Have we looked at Rugby and Warwick and etc., the councils that are within Warwickshire? Do they follow the same procedures as Coventry and Solihull? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that I am aware of Councillor Brown. I think I need to reiterate exactly what the recommendation says. It says that the leader of the council be invited to consider the request that the shadow leader of the council or their substitute be allowed to attend cabinet meetings as described in the report. So I'll move on. Councillor Brown, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just before I do speak, I've just had a message from Councillor Evans to say that he's lost his internet connection. He's trying to get back in, but he needs to be re-admitted to the meeting. So if Kelly could organise that, please. Yeah. I think this is a very sensible proposal as per the recommendation, and it's just non-controversial. And it's just about regularising in the Constitution the fact that the leader of the opposition can attend cabinet, contribute to the meeting, but not actually vote on decisions that are made. That will still be left to the controlling group, whoever that is. I would wholeheartedly support this, and I think we should move forward to the vote on it. Thank you. Once Councillor Evans is readmitted to the meeting, of course. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Well, I will await, Councillor, before I go to the vote, I will await any news that Councillor Evans has been able to rejoin the meeting.
I am here, Chair.
You're here, right, okay, thank you. So moving to the vote on this, and it is there in front of you in the papers, and should 2.1 be accepted, then it would be recommended to Council that the Constitution be amended accordingly. So I am moving that. Is there a seconder for that proposal, please?
I will second that, Chair. I will second that, Chair.
Thank you. I will await to see anyone who is against that proposal. Please show your hand. I see none, so that is agreed. Moving on to agenda item 9, which is the appointment to the remuneration panel. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, another one from the Constitution Review Working Party. The council is required to undertake a review of its members' allowances scheme every 4 years. It's up for review next year to be in place by May next year, ideally, and therefore we need to reconvene the independent remuneration panel. However, one of the issues that we've been presented with is that one member of that panel was a member of the Residents Executive Committee, which became the Residents Partnership. That has now been dissolved, so we need to find an alternative replacement. The Working Party agreed to recommend that a member from the voluntary sector who sits on the Towns Board be recommended, and we've approached Carver. Carver have agreed to put forward somebody to sit on the panel. So what we're asking for is that the constitution be updated to reflect that requirement. So the recommendations are set out in 2.1 of the report, Chair, and 2.2.
Thank you. Councillor Tromans. Oh, sorry, Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got great admiration for Carver. They do lots of great stuff, but one of the problems we've got in remuneration panels is that people can actually have circular interests in things. And so I'm actually quite keen that we get someone who the Borough Council is not funding to be part of this process. We already on the remuneration panel have officers from one council recommending pay rises in another council. And really, we are at a time when pay rises need to be reviewed very carefully. And so conflicts of interest and circular things of A recommends B and B recommends A are never a good idea. So although I've got total confidence and greatly admire the work Carver does, I do think we need to look for someone who's less connected with the Borough Council to sit on an independent remuneration panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure how the Speaker can have total confidence in them and then say that it's not appropriate for them to be on there. You can't always hold the two opposite views and at the same time. Anyway, my question to the officer is, can he describe exactly who is on the panel currently and how that was determined? Thank you.
Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The current panel composition is set out in 3.2 of the report, with the exception of item 4, Roman 4. So currently we have a representative from the Chamber of Commerce. There is either a representative from the local business partnership or the Coventry and Warwickshire Small Business Federation. And then, as Councillor Kandaka says, we do have a senior officer from one of the named local authorities locally, and I think that's really to give a bit of balance to any deliberations, to get a view from, if you like, from within. The current chair of the panel is still Dr. Declan Hall. He is a specialist. He's made a career out of it. Formerly of InLaGov at the University of Birmingham, and he tends to chair these not just for us, but for a significant local authorities, both across the West Midlands and across the country. So we appointed Dr. Hall with a view to him being able to undertake this exercise, and he does it very well. That's the current composition. Specifically as to individuals, Chair, we would approach those bodies again and see who is available to be able to actually physically be available to undertake the meetings, but it would be drawn from those bodies.
Thank you for that. But my question wasn't just who's on it. It was how did we get into that composition? How did we decide it was only going to be 5? Including the chair, with 4 people drawn locally, 1 from the Chamber of Commerce and all the rest of it. who made that determination? Is that a national formula or is that a government specified thing?
No, Chair. It was. It came originally many years ago, probably 5 years ago, from the Constitution Review Working Party. It was approved by this committee and ultimately approved by full council. So it went through a sort of a full decision-making process. Those were incorporated. That's so. 3.2 is taken straight from the Constitution, so that was the basis upon which it was done. Whether that's still appropriate, really, that's one for committee to consider.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Richardson. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. So once again, I just want to avoid the public being misinformed. Councillor Kandakar said that Carver are funded by MBBC. So I just want to make that clear that yes, I think MBBC do provide a grant to Carver, but we don't. We're not their sole funders. They get grants from other organisations too. So I just wanted to just clarify that we're not their sole funders. We just give them a small grant. I believe that's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. I have no more speakers, so I will move the recommendation, which states that Warwickshire and Solihull Community and Voluntary Action, Carver, be asked to nominate a representative to the Independent Remuneration Panel, and it be recommended to Council that the Constitution be amended accordingly. Is there a seconder for the proposal?
I will second that, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that I will look to a vote. If anyone is opposed to that, could you please show of hands? I see no hands, so that is agreed. So if we can move on to agenda item 10, which is the appointment of co-opted members. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, another one from the Constitution Review Working Party. As you know, Chair, we have reduced down the number of co-opted members down to 6. We have effectively, if you like, 3 very active members. And I say very active insofar as we've had 2 who have made regular attendance and 1 that is still very interested and keen to carry on. But that does leave vacancies for 3. The question was posed as to whether you wish to recruit now or whether you want to wait until the term of office of the current crop finishes, and the view was that we should do it now. So what you have is a recommendation that we go out to a sort of formal consultation and recruitment exercise. You have the criteria in the appendices attached, which sets out the role and also the what we're looking for. And the second recommendation in 2.2, Chair, is that we, as we did before, we have a panel of 3 members drawn from this committee who will undertake the interview process and then make recommendations. I should add, Chair, that ultimately appointments are made by full council because it is a formal appointment, so it would ultimately end up with full council to make the formal appointment based on the recommendation from the panel. And that's the recommendation.
Councillor Condacor.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think I asked to speak on this one.
Oh no, sorry, you didn't, Councillor Condacor, sorry. So we are, we'll move to the, I don't currently have any speakers on this item. So, I don't think, just one moment. So I can move to the recommendation, which I do have a very, very slight amendment to, but I'm hoping it can be accepted as part of the recommendation. 2.1 is that the delegated authority be given to the Director, Democracy, Planning and Public Protection in consultation with the Chair. My small amendment is, and the Vice Chair, to finalise the recruitment pack to recruit 3 additional co-opted members. And at 2.2, a panel of 3 members be appointed to undertake the formal interview process as outlined in the report. And I am making a suggestion, I repeat, a suggestion, that those 3 members are myself, the Vice Chair, Councillor Croft and Councillor Sargent. Those are the 2 recommendations. Is there a seconder for that proposal?
I will second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. We'll go to the vote. If anyone has any problems in relation to that, could you please let me know? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I don't doubt that yourself and the Chair and Councillor Sargent may well have wonderful experience of doing this job, there may be other members of this committee and elsewhere who have extensive interviewing skills that would be useful for this type of thing. And for that reason, I'll be quite happy to support the recommended change at 2.1. But I think you ought to give other people the chance to put themselves forward if they wish for 2.2.
I only said it was.
As you said, it was just a suggestion. I'm offering another suggestion. If
Well,
people
okay, or we will move out of the suggestion I made, and a panel of 3 members be appointed to undertake the formal interview process as outlined in the report. So therefore, as was seconded, so does anyone, if anyone is opposed to that proposal, then please tell me now. Could you put your hand down, Councillor Brown, please? Thank you. Right. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Brown? Oh, right. Okay.
Chair,
So,
Chair, I believe I already have.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you wanted to speak again.
Not really, but I noticed Councillor Croft had his hand.
Had he? Just. Sorry, Councillor Croft.
I was going to say I'm happy to do it, Chair, if the committee, if that's the wish of the committee. But as you've tried to go for a sort of bipartisan balance, if any members of the Conservative on the committee want to put themselves forward and think they've got better interviewing skills, I'd happily withdraw.
Councillor Croft, we will have to do it through the normal process of asking groups who they want to nominate. Right. Councillor Sargent, did you want to speak? No? Okay.
No.
Okay, we will go to the vote. Is there any dissent on that proposal? I'm not seeing any at the moment, so that is agreed. Okay, moving over to agenda 11, which is the dispensations that you have there. There are those 2 dispensations, one for Councillor Shepherd, Councillor J. Shepherd, and one for Councillor Jackson. I believe these are just for noting, Mr. Richardson. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. It's for members' information.
Thank you. So we don't need to vote on them. Right. So we will move, we've done 12 and we've done 13. We will move to agenda item 14, which is the Treasury Management. I think we're back with you, Craig.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair, for this one. Right, the final item of this agenda, and this is the first report of this financial year, covers the first 6 months of what has been quite a turbulent start of the financial year. We've been reporting for many years that we've been faced with historic low interest rates, but now we've got a completely new scenario with even lower interest rates and an economic situation never before experienced. Growth in the economy is not expected to be rapid, and there's no increase in bank rate on the horizon. 4.1 does show the interest rate forecast, and you can see that the estimated earnings on investments are extremely low. But it should be noted too that that table and those interest earnings are for a wider counterparty list than we currently use. And the returns available to us are not quite at those levels, they're actually lower. 5.4 does show the current portfolio position, and net debt is a lot lower than the opening position, as cash flows into the account are greater at the start of the year as we receive grants, but we spend them later on through the financial year. Also, £3.5 million of HRA debt has been repaid in the first 6 months, and we've not yet replaced it. It should also be noted that LIBID rates, which we use as a benchmark for our investment returns, were actually in negative territory at the end of September, and the markets are pricing in a further cut of bank rate to go into negative. But the Governor of the Bank of England has tried to state that such a move would do more damage than good, so we're not expecting to see rates actually cut. The table at 5.5 does show the detailed breakdown of our investment portfolio at the end of September, and you will note on there that we've actually got almost £4 million on Lloyd's in the current account that's actually earning nothing at all, which does seem a bit high. Reason for that is that counterparty availability for short-dated investments was not there, so we couldn't do that. An alternative was money market funds, but the returns on the money market funds would have actually meant that it would have cost more than the interest we'd have earned. So we made the decision to keep the investments in the current account. Average returns at table 520 show that we are ahead of benchmarks for the first 6 months, but as you'd expect, returns are a lot lower than the previous financial year. More interestingly, sections 521 to 533 does show a movement. Echo. Hello, is that any better? Is that finished now? Not sure where that came from. Apologies for that one.
I must apologise, Chair. That was me. I've just rejoined, but it was on my phone. I do.
Sorry. Okay, carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Okay. 521 to 533 does show the movement on the property fund, and as you'd expect, this has taken a hit on its capital value. Yields on rentals remain higher than you'd expect than a traditional cash deposit, and the current statutory override continues to allow for the reversal of capital losses from the revenue account, and that's shown in 5.32. Members should also be aware that during the first half of the year there was a freeze on transactions on the property fund to protect current and potential investors. This wasn't just on this particular fund, but on all property funds in the marketplace, so it wasn't an unusual move. The freeze on transactions has been reversed, so there's been more market certainty on asset valuations, so transaction prices available to potential investors. 5.36 shows the capital financing requirement, and the level of under borrowing has increased further since the year end. This is affordable in the short term and does help with generating some revenue savings during these uncertain times. But I am expecting to take some debt later in the year to ensure cash flow resources can be maintained and we can meet our expenditure commitments. 538 does show the latest revenue forecast and takes these debt interest savings into account. And finally, section 6 shows the approved indicators and the latest forecasts are all are in line with the approved limits. So the committee are just asked to note the report. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Condicore.
Thank you very much. This is my last comment of the night. Yeah, I always admire the difficult job that Craig has to do, more so this year. A couple of things to note. One is we have this problem as a borough council that people pay the council tax in 10 instalments, or most people do. So we actually have a lot of money coming in, and then we have 2 months with very little income. And I do think it might be worth trying to encourage some more people to move over to paying in 12 instalments, particularly if they're being furloughed or have other cash flow problems, which actually means we get the money slightly later, but as we're not earning any money on it, it seems more sensible for people to pay in 12 monthly instalments rather than 10. Over the year, that makes things work. And I also think we should work more with the county council, because they have the exact opposite cash flow problem, because we're holding money that they may wish to spend. So I think I've always said, yeah, all this back office stuff of the borrowing and lending money should be more done cooperatively with the county, because we're actually opposite counterbodies. Yeah, they may be borrowing money at the same time as we may be investing. It just doesn't seem sensible to have 2 bits of councils doing opposite things. And finally, on the property fund, I think a year ago, people said property couldn't go down in value. There were councils at this council believed that property could never devalue. And I think that's very reckless. And I think we are getting more aware, and more people will be, particularly at the end of this year when house prices fall, that values of property can go up as well as down. And I just wondered if we could have a bit of a comment from Craig about this reversal and how these things work. We've got £78,000 loss on capital value that's then being reversed out. So I think people need to understand, does that then get put back in at some time when it becomes real again, or how does that work? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Craig, do you wish to respond?
I can clarify a few matters. With regards to people paying their council tax instalments over 12 rather than 10, that is already available to them, and it's included in the council tax leaflet, so they just need to make a phone call to our revenue section and make that arrangement. Also, regarding our preset payments to the county council and to the police authority, the timetable for that is set in regulation, and that is prescribed, so we can't amend that to satisfy either party, unfortunately. Final point regarding the property fund. At the moment, we've got, I think, 3 years left on the statutory override, which allows for this reversal of the capital losses or potential capital gains to be kept on the balance sheet. At the moment, on the statement of accounts, that's held in unusable reserves. If at a time where that statutory override is reversed, those losses or gains would hit the general fund revenue account. At the moment, we are making no decisions on withdrawing funds from the property fund. We have always accepted that there is going to be a risk, but we've always treated it as a long-term investment, and taken the view that over time, the volatility of ups and downs will, we'll see capital prices, taking a marginal gain, as is shown historically. It just seems at the moment we've got this unprecedented situation where they have taken a bit of a battering because of uncertainty from COVID and more recently Brexit as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Corey Sonola, you wish to speak?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Craig, could you just say, just page 49, could you just kindly just explain again 5.27, please?
Okay, thank you. This is regarding the temporary suspension on transactions in the property fund.
Yes, yes. Again.
Yeah. The reason being is because when people invest or want to sell their share of property fund, it's based on a share price. So it's not based on what we've put in this, and property funds are valued each month. Because of COVID, there was no market transactions happening to actually say this is a realistic share price. So potentially people could have been investing into a property fund, and the price they would have jumped in at wasn't going to be reflective of the market. So it was protecting them because they could have invested at completely the wrong price, which would have been a detriment to them. But also it was protecting people exiting the fund as well, because we could have potentially sold at too low a price. At September, they reversed that freeze because they had identified that the market had stabilised, that they could actually place more certainty on valuations in that property fund itself.
Just one more, please, Chair. 5.20. Now, the bottom figure there, the total, the weighted average, right? 75686. Now, if we just now, if we go back to 5.4, the actual, right, of 73705. Do we do any adjustment in the nominal ledger, or we just for information only?
No, the table at 5.4 is a snapshot position of what our actual debt was at the 30th of September.
Yep.
The table that you referred to at the start, was it 5.20? Yes, 5.20. Yeah. That's the average for the first 6 months.
Yeah.
So because we started off with debt higher and we have repaid some, it will be a different figure because it is the average for the first 6 months of the financial year.
Yeah. Do we do any adjustment at all in the accounts, or we just nominal?
No, in the accounts of the authority, what happens is the balance sheet will show what the actual debt and investment is as at the 31st of March, so a balance sheet date, and the amounts that are reflected as debt cost or interest cost, so interest, that's based on the whole 12 months from the 1st of April through to the 31st of March.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to thank Craig for making what's effectively quite a dry financial report into something. I would just, as somebody who's spent more than 30 years working in...
Councillor Brown, would you like to start again because we lost you for a few seconds?
Yes, of course. I would just like to thank Craig for his excellent report and in making a dry financial report something that the average layperson can understand listening to. And as somebody who's got more than 30 years experience in contributing data to the property market, I would just like to concur with him that property is a long-term investment and not something that we should be panicking about a temporary reversal due to unusual circumstances. In my experience, generally over a decade period, property invariably rises in value and proves to be a good investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to comment, Councillor Craig?
No, thank you very much. Yeah, that's thank you very much for the comments from Councillor Brown. And yes, I agree. When we invested in the property fund, we took the decision that this was going to be a very long-term investment, and yeah, we accept the risks, which is why we've only got a small proportion of the overall portfolio put into that area of investment.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Anyway, I don't have any more speakers, and I will move the recommendation as printed that the committee note the report. Is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you. Okay. I see no dissent. Councillor Evans, I think you have your microphone on.
No.
Well, not now, no. Right, so I see no dissent to the proposal, so that is carried. We then move on to the last item on the agenda, which is any other items. It has been brought to my attention that I have two members who wish to ask me a question, but I do need to make a point before those questions are asked. The rules on questions are the same as at council at 4.10.2 of the Constitution. There will be no supplementary questions, nor debate, discussion, or points of order, and only the written question submitted is to be asked. When the question has been asked, I will respond to the question. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Could the Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee please outline how Article 419.3 within the Council's Constitution promotes democratic engagement and participation within the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. The 4.19.3 to inform all members of the committee states, if a member persistently disregards or challenges the ruling of the mayor by behaving improperly or offensively or deliberately obstructs business, the mayor may move that the member be not heard further. If the seconded, the member will be voted on without discussion. If the motion is carried, the named member may not speak at the meeting. I'm not sure that it matters what my view is, as it is currently quite clear within the Constitution at 419.3, which, as I said earlier, relates to, and I quote, councillor not to be heard further. If you are not satisfied that is not correct or should not be included in the Constitution, then you are in the best position as a member of the Constitutional Review Working Party to raise it for discussion. In fact, Councillor Evans, as chair of that working party, I will request that that particular part of the Constitution forms part of the Constitution Review Working Party agenda at its meeting in December. Mr. Richardson, could you look at doing that, please?
Point of order, Chair.
I'm sorry, we have no points of order. There is no discussion. As I said earlier, there are no.
I think I can still raise a point of order, can't I?
No, because there is no discussion, so no point of order.
Could you tell me the basis for that in the Constitution, please?
Mr. Richardson, could you tell them the basis of that in the Constitution, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the questions, obviously, as you've said, the rules that apply to questions are the same for council meetings as they are for full council. So in terms of the options open to council, in terms of questions, it does say in paragraph, if you'll bear with me, Chair, whilst I find it. It says in 4.9.8 that unless the mayor decides otherwise, no discussion will take place on any question, but any member may move that a matter raised by a question be referred to the Cabinet or the appropriate committee. Once seconded, such a motion will be voted on without discussion. So, Chair, you will need to seek a seconder to your proposal and then take a vote on that. In terms of the points of order, points of order arise in connection with Council Procedure Rule 413, which is the rules of debate. And of course, 413 requires there to be a sort of formal debate with motions, etc., etc. So, as it says in 413.12, which is the specific paragraph that deals with points of order, it says a member may raise a point of order at any time. The mayor will hear them at the end of the speech of the member speaking at the time. So because there's no debate on questions, there's no facility really to allow for a point of order. Obviously, outside of the constitution, it would be for you as chair to exercise any discretion to allow members to speak outside of that. But technically, within the terms of the constitution, points of order wouldn't arise as it's not actually a formal matter before the committee.
So, Director Richardson, if you could just clarify for me that if I wish that the mayor's proposed a motion in response to the question, if I wish to propose a different motion in response to the question, I'm not allowed to do that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I'm just writing the proposal on chat.
Point of personal
Can you
explanation.
just hang on one moment, Councillor Evans, please? I'm just writing my proposal on chat. I cannot deal with you whilst I am doing that. Right. I'll take your point of personal explanation, or because there's been no discussion, I find it quite difficult to know where there can be one, but carry on.
Yes, so you've just moved a proposal in the chat, which I just see. I just wonder what legitimacy that has if you can't allow debate to take place on this item. If you've basically, Director Richardson, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that you can't allow a point of order because you can't allow debate. There's no mechanism to allow debate.
The reason I have moved that proposal is because Mr. Richardson told me I had to move a proposal that the question be referred to the CW, wrong initials, the Constitutional Review Working Party. I think that was the advice you gave me, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, Chair, if I can just clarify, because I think it might help Councillor Evans. In the procedure rules in connection with questions, it says under 4.9.8, obviously this is written for council, but if you translate it or transpose it for committee, it says, unless the mayor decides otherwise, no discussion will take place on any question, but any member may move that a matter raised by a question be referred to the cabinet or the appropriate committee. And it says, once seconded, such a motion will be voted on without discussion. So it's one of those items. I'm trying to think, we've got a couple of those in the Constitution elsewhere, where it says that it's not a debate item. There is no debate on it. You just go straight to the vote on it.
In which case, Chair, could I make an amendment to your motion, please?
Well, could you write it on the chat, please?
Yep. That I formally propose that as an amendment.
Right, thank you. I need to ask you a question, Mr. Richardson, bearing in mind a comment you made earlier. I think you said that any member could refer it to the cabinet or the council, or did you say the committee have to do that?
No, it's any member, Chair, any member.
So if you wish to refer your question to council, then you can do so without needing to move an amendment, Councillor Evans.
Director Richardson, is that correct? I wasn't aware that I could decide the agenda for the next full council meeting.
I don't think it's an issue that can be put on the agenda as such, but obviously you could ask the same question or put a question or a suggestion to council under the sort of procedure rules under 4A10, which is questions by councillors. So you could certainly do that. if I can just mention, Madam Mayor, and obviously it's pertinent to this, I don't think Councillor Evans can move an amendment because of the nature of this, that it's a question. I don't think you can actually move an amendment because amendments, again, are in connection with or come under the rules of debate, and therefore it would have to be an agenda item that was under consideration to be able to amend it. So I don't think that you're in a position to move an amendment, but you can certainly raise that issue directly by raising it as a question to full council.
I stand by the amendment that I've moved.
But you've just been told you can't do that, Councillor Evans.
You need to rule that out of order as chair then.
Councillor Evans or anyone else, I will not be bullied into submission on this one. So please, I do not want to hear the sort of comments that you have just made. In fact, I will withdraw my proposal as it stands, Councillor Evans, and I will propose that this question is referred to a full council meeting. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. So I take it that you are withdrawing your amendment then, Councillor Evans?
Well, if you've withdrawn your motion, then that automatically withdraws my amendment.
Well, you could have turned it into a proposal if you'd so chosen to, but you didn't. So, okay, we will refer. The decision is that this question is referred. Do I need to take a vote on that, Councillor, Mr. Richardson?
Yes, Chair, you do.
Okay. Is there a seconder for my proposal?
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay, let me go back to participants. Okay. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Brown? Councillor Brown, you have your hand. No, thank you. So therefore, we have a proposal that the question is referred to a full council meeting, and I understand it will be discussed by the full council chair. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, Chair, it will stand as an item referred to full council for debate from Audit and Standards Committee.
Thank you. So we will move to the vote. Does anyone have any? Does anyone want to speak on it or show any? If there's no dissent, I will continue with the next question. Okay, there is no dissent. Thank you. My next question is from Councillor Brown, and the same rules apply. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, does the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee believe that she's complied with Article 9A.1 of the Council's Constitution since May 2019? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and my response is, to my knowledge and the best of my ability, my answer is yes. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, that is the end of the council business. So, Kelly, could you ensure that the live streaming is turned off, please?
I will let you know, Chair, once